Welcome back to Piston Perspectives. Once again, I'm Elliot Custodio, and I'm joined with Joe, GT Joey Limongelli, and Todd Warren. Today's topic, fellas, we're going to talk about our favorite Jaguars. New, old, it's all on the table. Who wants to start?
Go ahead, Todd.
Me? Okay. Kind of a tough question, actually. My favorite Jaguar is probably an SS100.
Okay, good choice.
Because I've just loved it, always loved the looks. Was a little kid when I first saw one, the enormous headlights, all that stuff. Have seen many over the years, but I've never driven one, so it's something of a hero that I have not actually experienced. Other than that, I'm going to go with an XK140. I kind of struggle with the 140, 120 thing. 120 is prettier. 140 is almost, but not quite as pretty, but you can actually sort of fit in it, and it has rack and pinion steering, and it has better brakes. So overall, I'm going that way.
Yeah.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, neat stuff. I'm all over the map with this. This is great.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
We all have Jags in this group, which is unique.
It's cool.
You know, old and new.
I think Todd and I, right? We have the oldest out of the group.
And I love my 120, but my first love was the E-Type, as we've talked in the past, because of Speed Racer and the little E-Type would come out at the end. And then really more modern, even though I've had all my E-Types and all the more modern cars, the XJ6 is really the car. You know, Series 1, all I know is when we moved up in the world, my father moved to the north side of the village, we had a 72 Cadillac, and you thought you made it.
Yeah, yeah.
You thought you made it when you had the Cadillac. Okay, you're Italian, you got a Cadillac. And then we moved up north, and we were at the first red light, and this brown, cinnamon brown, 72 XJ6 Series 1, chrome bumpers, and it was just another world. It was like you owned a Rolls Royce, but without owning a Rolls Royce. It was classy, and it was sporty at the same time. And ever since then, the love for Jags just never ended. And probably my best Jag was my 95 after Ford put all the money into it. XJ6 black on black.
Yeah.
And all I can tell you is I did 130,000 miles in that car in 4 years, leaving it outside in the rain. And the looks, the reliability, it finally came up to where it was supposed to be from the image. You know?
Yeah.
And it was just bulletproof. But we got the history and everything else with racing and everything else, and D-types and 120s and the SSs. So there's a lot to cover. It's good. What about for you?
It's tough because I ask myself, well, what classifies a favorite? What classifies the best?
It's very thoughtful of you.
Well, you know, I'm going to err a little slightly more on the more modern side than you guys. I think from a design perspective, the extremely rare XJR 15,
Yeah, sure.
right? And it comes with headphones so you can talk to the passenger because it's just so darn loud inside. From a design perspective, it's gorgeous. We saw a yellow one at Amelia. I would love the opportunity to drive something like that. And I also think the XJ220 is cool and has a very interesting story. It kind of feels like the car that almost was.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with an E-Type. The XK line you can't go wrong with either. I like the exclusivity of those two other cars. You just never see them.
Right.
They may or may not be the best at what they do relative to the competitive set, but you just don't see them, and I like that. And then I go back to the Jaguars that I actually owned because while they may not have been the most spectacular, they were mine, right? So it kind of gave me that experience. So my first Jaguar, which was actually the first vehicle that I bought new, was the 2001 X-Type, which was the first year of that brand new model.
Yeah.
Ford ownership, the little car, all-wheel drive. I found a rare one that was actually a 5-speed manual, which was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was rare.
The 5-speed, if I remember correctly, was only available in the 3-liter, not the 2.5.
Correct.
I had like this periwinkle color. I don't remember the exact name of the color, but it had an ivory interior. It was fantastic. But it was a first-year Jaguar. And it with the important mechanical stuff, benefited from being a Ford-built car. The stuff that drove me nuts was more accessory-based. I had these two front vents that if too much sun beat on them, they would just start to peel up. And to me, that was just driving me nuts because that was unacceptable for a Jaguar. Anyway, it wasn't the best car. Some people really don't like that car for a variety of reasons. But I owned one. It was great while I had it. If I needed a daily, especially one that could go through the winter, I'd buy one again.
Yeah.
You know, but because that was my first, it just, I've had nicer Jaguars since, but that got me into the brand in a special way.
Well, that's why. Look, when he's talking about 140s, 120s, the 50s and 60s, these are hand-built cars in a factory that was before World War II.
Right.
And then we go from there, and Ford buys them for $8 billion in the early mid-90s. And then you get the ones you're more used to, okay? And that's where this topic is unique, because if you look at it, there really is a line down the middle. Are you with the old school guys and you have to carry your spanners and screwdrivers because everything's going to be leaking a block down the road and the battery might die and it might not start up? Or do you go more modern? And your X-Type was the guinea pig of the cheaper version of the line. Remember, Bill Lyon's best year was 25,000 cars. Ford was projecting 250 to 300,000 cars, and that was one of the 7-car lineup, which they used to have 2. A sports car and a saloon. It was just XJ and the XJS in more modern times, or the E-Type and a Mark II at the time, okay? So that's why that goes like that. But yeah, I'm all over the map. I'll take an
a point you said about, as far as drawing a line.
Yeah.
I think it draws a line as far as perhaps build quality, certainly ownership, which has changed over the years. But I don't necessarily think there's a line drawn between those that are into the modern Jags and those that are into the vintage Jags as far as the appreciation of Jag.
Oh, the style and all.
I'm going to agree with that.
And I say that because growing up for me, it's similar to your story. You thought Caddy was the top of the line until you saw that there was other things out there.
Right.
In my family, we always thought that Mercedes was the pinnacle, and it took a long time to be able for that to even become an option. But we also saw Jaguar in the same light, and while we always gave credit to Mercedes build quality, Jaguar felt a notch above, and that was probably more of an exclusivity thing. It was just a notch above in being special.
Right.
And
I agree.
That appreciation came from what I saw on the road in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
I didn't need to buy a car from the 70s and 80s to actualize that appreciation.
It's interesting you say that about Mercedes, because when we were growing up, Mercedes, I think, from a build quality standpoint, really was the best there was. But Jaguars were nicer, and they appealed more to the gut, to the heart.
Yeah.
They had more character. A lot of people would say that's because they did things they shouldn't do. At times they shouldn't do it. That said, had a pretty significant number of Jaguars in my family, both my parents and me over the years.
Yeah.
And we really never had a bad one. We had some that were better than others, but we never had a lot of trouble.
Right.
Even when I think the reputation for poor quality was really earned, and I do mean earned, in the 70s.
Late 70s,
We had a 73 and a 74 E-Type. The build quality of those two cars was quite different, and I think that was very typical of British Leyland at the time, where there were good ones and there were bad ones, and maybe there were more bad ones than good ones, but we had a good one. We had a 73 E-Type that I drove a fair amount, and it could be 95 degrees sitting still in traffic, and that temperature gauge never budged from normal. And then at 70, 80 miles an hour on that same day later on, temperature gauge never budged from normal. And yes, we did check to see whether it read accurately.
Yeah.
The 140 also never gave us any trouble. Lucas Electrics never really gave us much trouble.
I think it was more though on the primitive side, The
That's
140.
a different, it's a different thing. But before we go on to another thing, about the Jaguar Mercedes thing, Jaguar made its name really by making cars that seemed to be Mercedes-like for a much lower cost.
30% less.
And that's kind of gone away over the years, at least the gap is narrowed. But then there was a huge price difference, but the Jaguar really looked every bit as nice, if not nicer.
I think.
But when you looked underneath things, you did see where the money difference actually went.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
saw how Mercedes did things differently beneath the surface. But
Yeah,
that was what Jaguar was. I mean, going back to the beginning, right, with the SS cars, even before the Jaguar SS 100, which was the first to use the name. The SS cars looked like Bentleys, but they were half the cost,
Right.
and they weren't as fast, and they weren't as good. And
Have you guys
whatever
actually seen a Swallow sidecar, like in person?
else. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Is it cool?
it is
Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
It is
They're,
cool.
they're small, you know.
I would imagine
a
so.
lot smaller.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to remember, Norman Dewis was the test driver for what, 54 years? The longest
like
test driver in all history.
Yeah.
Right? He's this tall. You know? So when you got an E-Type or 120, yeah, it felt great for him. But the American market was supreme, and we're twice the size. Whether it was weight or whether it was height, and like he knows, I know, I'm 6 foot tall with the 120 with the pedals, going through the floor the old-fashioned way, and the steering wheel with a straight shaft, and there's no knuckle. It's right here in
Yeah.
the chest,
Yeah,
But
and the 120 has the cone-shaped thing that really looks like it's
Right,
going to
it-
spear you.
right.
And you have to take your shoes off to operate
I
the
actually had
pedals.
to take off my shoes.
Yeah,
They were so tight.
I remember that.
But now I became friends with Norman Dewis. He got in there. His feet is size 6, mine is size 11. And
Yeah.
there's the difference. But you can't get away from the elegance of the car. Look, we used to go to dealership in the 70s. 70s going to the 80s was a great time. 70s, the car quality was terrible, but you still had independent car owners, right? Local car owners. They owned the dealership. They called their own shots. When my father got his first XJ6, it was a Series 3, okay, Pininfarina design, so it was 1980-ish. And they're still terrible, but they look beautiful, okay?
Yeah.
Terrible cars. I just fall apart, okay? But my mother would be in there every 3 weeks, and they'd have coffee, donuts, cake. They literally had a living room, right? And they
In the
sat there
dealership.
watching in the dealership for the wives or whoever, because you were in there once every 4 weeks. By the time we got to Ford,
Right.
and then I got my 95.
Yeah.
So I bought my first new jet. No, my first new one was 92, 93. Actually 40, which was a great car, but the last of the old stuff. Their warranty work was terrible, but it was a great car. Bulletproof, but small stuff. But the 95, I felt bad because the quality was so great. I never saw the mechanics anymore. We never saw anybody anymore. We were used to going there for the donuts and the coffee and just hanging out talking to these guys.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was different. It turned into everybody else. Like he said, in the 80s especially, a Mercedes was $43,000 and the Jag was $26,500. That was the difference in the price. The Jag, you got the wood, you got the leather. The Mercedes had it, but it was just a colder car. But the Mercedes was built like a tank.
Yep.
Like a tank.
Yeah. Now,
You
about the variability,
Yeah.
my mother's first Jag was bought new. It was an 84 XJ6 Fan Plus. Bought it from Sportique. I remember going in there the day we bought it. It was silver sand over doe skin, I think.
Almost
It
white.
was absolutely beautiful.
Beautiful car.
Beautiful, beautiful thing. The Van Plus had the burlwood and the wool.
The wool mats, right? Yeah.
In
Lamb's
three of
wool.
the four footwells. It was a beautiful thing. It gave us no trouble until 50,000 miles. In 50,000 miles, the Borg-Water automatic died.
Yeah.
Went to the dealer, was replaced, and 6 months later, the replacement Borg-Water automatic died.
Yeah.
But that seemed to be just a bad one to
Yeah.
begin with.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then again, it was fine.
Yeah.
The windshield wipers did quit working once in the pouring rain.
Right.
But those
That's
three
fun.
things, I think, are the only things that went wrong with it. And so that was, overall,
Yeah.
See, I'm more
a pretty
yeah.
good car.
Yeah, I'm more at the mechanical side because, from a kid I've been working on cars. On those cars, if you remember, for whatever reason, they had 3 inline fuses for the wiper system. One was for the pulse, one was for the high speed, and one was for the low speed. So you'd see these people, probably like your mom, and the wiper's like here. It's just stuck there. Well, that fuse blew, but you had to rip half the dash out to get to that fuse, half the dash. And then there was the fuse for the low and the high. And it was just, look, it was a great time, but it was just, but you live with it. People would not, you got to agree, people today do not have that patience or
No,
tolerance
they definitely don't.
to put up with that.
Here's
It just doesn't exist.
a little trivia thing, just from remembering the cars. So obviously it has the 4.2 XK engine, which
Yeah.
I think was 176 horsepower.
Yeah.
Why do I remember that? If I'm right, and tires were Pirelli P5s.
Pirelli
Again,
P5s the whole way. Michelin
why
was
is
an
that?
option.
Why do I remember that?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's
Well, it was a big deal
Correct.
because the Pirellis, you know, it was like a race car, but it was.
no, but it was a
Yeah.
P5 specifically.
What year?
Yeah.
84.
Yeah, that was Series 3s. Yeah. They were terrible in the cold, and they had to warm up every day, right? Did you drive the car much? You know, you needed.
I drove it some.
Yeah, you needed a good 5 miles.
I was very young
Yeah,
then, just
yeah.
starting to drive. But
Yeah, but you needed a good 5 miles. But listen,
most cars
it
then
was
had to
just-
kind of wake up.
yeah, but it was a great time because.
No, but that's a
My
good
dad-
point. A lot of
yeah.
cars needed time to officially warm up.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
not really much of a thing anymore.
British cars maybe more so than
Yeah,
others,
right.
but
But,
nonetheless.
but I remember that's why this is a good topic because it's fun. You know, we remember all this.
Yeah.
Stuff. But when we get to the newer cars, what are you going to talk about? The style, the bulletproof. And all.
I think it goes back to your personal experience with it.
Right.
Like, with the X-Type in particular, and random fact or random memory, I remember driving, I want to say it was autumn, but I was going down, what is it, 55th Street that goes across Grand Central?
Okay.
Asking the wrong guy.
That's fine. No, he's definitely the wrong guy. I think it's 55th Street.
Somebody.
42nd Street.
Yeah,
42nd
as you
Street.
say, I think that's wrong.
Yeah,
actually,
no,
now
that's
that I'm-
super wrong.
Now that I'm thinking about it.
42nd Street.
Driving down 42nd Street, and just before, whatever, you've got Grand Central, and then there's a restaurant, and then there's that overpass.
Yep.
On that overpass was a banner from Jaguar announcing their new car starting at, I think it was $29,999.
Right. It's under 30 grand.
And they had that there because we were leading up to the Jacob Javits New York City Auto Show. At that auto show,
Right.
I got to see the car.
Right.
It was a very cool experience. But again, it wasn't the greatest car, and I've had nicer Jaguars, but
Yeah, but
that
still-
memory is
Yeah.
so important to me.
And that's, there have been so many, I don't know, periods or eras or whatever, right, with Jaguar. They were, after William Lyons, they were owned by various BL
Right.
type things. Like then John Egan came in and really did
John Egan
a
did
lot
a
of good,
wonderful job.
a lot of good,
Wonderful
improving the
job.
quality. But there's the, as you said, I certainly like old Jags and middle-aged Jags and newer Jags.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the things that people complain about the X-Type and the S-Type is that it was based on a Ford Contour,
Right.
and the S-Type is based on the Lincoln. The name I can't.
It was the
LS.
Lincoln LS
Thank you.
that shared the same
Lincoln LS,
platform.
right.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of there's the
X
purist
wasn't on the
element to that.
Contour, it was on the
Mondeo.
Mondeo.
Which I think was a Contour
Yeah.
here. I think it was Mondeo.
Yeah.
In
It was Mondeo overseas, yeah.
I think it was a Contour here. So is it a Jaguar? Is it not a Jaguar? There's that whole element also, which has of course spread to all kinds of other
Right.
marks and brands now
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah,
Let me add one thing about
Go
the
ahead.
X-Type.
yeah.
Oh, it's not a new car anymore at all.
Yep.
Right? But for whatever reason, I don't know if this is because it was actually built pretty well or people who have them really like them, but when you see an X-Type, it's usually in pretty good shape.
It really is.
And I've noticed that it sort of stands out that way, and there's got to
Yeah.
be a reason for it.
Well, it was all modern materials when it came out. My mom had the first year as
But
well.
so
She had the ice
is
block.
everything else from that era. But most cars you see from
Yeah, but there was nothing
similar eras.
carryover. Like the XJ, like the X300, the XJ6.
Yeah.
It was carryover from XJ40, which went all the way back to the 7. It was all modern technology at the new plant for the X-Type at that time.
Okay. But
But-
why do they seem to hold up over time better than
Well,
other
I mean,
other cars from the same?
I think the
period?
average owner was older then. They died and spent in the garage for 20
No, but the average, I would go with the average
Cadillacs.
owner is
Cadillacs too.
typically older, even for the
Yeah.
X-Type. I think the X-Type was their effort to fight the 3 Series.
Right.
Yep.
That,
Right,
that
I-
was the BM3 Series 5.
Right, at least to try to get what was my demographic at the time.
But then you want to know what was the best out of that deal? Which I begged them and they finally did it. I had some friends there. The estate wagon.
Estate wagon was cool.
2023, whatever year this is. I will take an X-type estate wagon now. They're so much fun. You have all the space in the back, and it's just great.
Yeah, and it's all-wheel drive. Now, if you can find that in a stick, I don't know if that was an option on the estate.
Europe and diesel. in
But they had
Europe.
diesel over
But I
there,
don't-
yeah.
I think it's still too new. You have to be 25 years to transfer to the state. Because I was going to buy the Queen's wagon. You know, when
Yeah,
she
yeah,
died,
yeah.
it was a diesel, and you had to wait 25 years to bid on it in the United States to clear customs.
To
You
bid
know,
on it, or you have to wait
No,
25
no,
years
you
to bring
can
it.
bring it to the States.
Right, yeah,
Right, so
yeah.
what was
Yeah.
the purpose of
Unless you do a show and display or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the Queens, it might
It was
work.
fun, yeah.
You know, that might pass the show and display test.
Yeah,
You should have gone through with it.
should have. But, so
I-
we went through Mercedes.
Yep.
We went through Lexus, our family. Nobody knows any of those people. But when you say Jag, it's funny. It's still an old family company.
Yeah.
And you knew Norman Dewis. You knew who Bill Lyons was. You knew who Ian Callum was from Aston Martin to Jaguar.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the last of the old group.
I mean-
it's fun.
I know we're not going to have enough time to get into
Yeah.
the future of Jaguar, if there is one, and our thoughts on that. And that's a great
Yeah.
opportunity for another episode. You could argue that while Ford's effort to sell hundreds of thousands of units
Yeah.
every year didn't really come to fruition, and that may
No.
have hurt where Jaguar is today.
Yep, and that's applicable to a lot of small companies that were
Right.
bought by bigger companies.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Sure.
It so often
remember-
doesn't
But
work.
would you agree that it could have, in the opposite sense, had a positive effect on how we view the cachet of Jaguar today?
I do.
Everywhere you go,
I
and
do
maybe,
agree. Yeah.
and maybe this is, we see what we see because we live here, and if you
Right,
live there, you
right.
see something else. But you see Mercedes all the time on the road, BMW all the time, Lexus all the time. You see all these cars all the time on the road. You bump into them if you wanted to. You don't always go a day seeing a Jaguar.
Right. And then when you do see the Jag, everybody goes, it's a Jag. It's the only one that sticks
Yeah.
out.
And to your point, a lot of them are in great shape, and it's not just the X-Type, the XK,
Yeah.
XK8, XKR, the X100 generation of those.
Completely
Ian
agree with
Callum's
that.
I
designs
very
are-
rarely see one that's in poor condition.
But I think to the relatively low volume, I'm kind of glad it didn't work, because to me that's what Jaguar. That's
Yeah.
not what Jaguar is.
Right.
It's what the other companies are. Jaguar always was a smaller company. It was more
boutique
interesting. It wasn't the default. It was
Right.
kind of exotic without really being exotic, but it was kind of
And you
exotic.
could enjoy the car.
And easy for me to say now, of course, but even at the time, I just thought that's not what Jaguar is supposed to be.
Right, right.
So to try to make it into BMW or Audi or whatever, that's not what it is.
It wasn't
and it
working.
didn't work. And
Yep.
it- and it still hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of great designs. I love them all. I know you love them all
Yeah,
as well.
'cause
I don't care if it's a SS100
Oh, love that.
or last year's, even the last of the old XJs, the ones that the final cars with gasoline that they're making.
Yeah, yeah.
All of a sudden, they're nice cars.
There is no ugly Jag.
And I will add
Yeah.
that I would love to find maybe my favorite sedan, modern-ish sedan of the last 50, 60 years, a Series 1 XJ12.
No, that'd be cool.
Series 1, big grille,
Short
the
wheelbase,
vertical
chrome
bar,
bumpers,
exactly.
yeah.
Short wheelbase, the vertical bars as opposed to the
Yeah.
crosshatch bars that the XJ6 has.
71, 70.
XJ12, I love that.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that than a 300 SEL 6.3.
Well, that chassis used all the way from 68, went all the ways up to 92, 94, even after they were done with the XJ40.
in Europe, yeah.
Keeping them, that's how popular. But that chassis, I had a 72.
There was an early 90s,
Just like a 90s car. It's beautiful.
there was an early 90s, I'm going to say 92, XJ12 Canadian car at
Correct.
Hershey a few years ago. Beautiful.
Beautiful. So
And
it
it was
looked
like
old,
20 grand.
but it was built in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was the last of the carryover using the rest of the shells.
Right.
All V12s. And they basically had a VDP package, Van Platen side, where you had the double seats in the back with the center
Yeah.
cushion. It was just a beautiful car.
Or a Daimler 66.
Yeah. Well, that was the European version with the flutes.
Well, I think it's safe to say we love Jaguars.
Yeah.
And we could certainly keep on talking. We'll save some for another episode. Thank you again for joining us on Piston Perspectives.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, tune in again. We'll see you soon. Thank you.